viewers of OBN Horn of Africa. This is our special edition, and today I'm joined by Mr. Kwame Gonza from Ghana, and Mr. Kwame Gonza is our partner. He is no more new guest, and today we are going to discuss on the current situation in Ethiopia. And thank you very much for joining me once again, Mr. Kwame.
Oh, thank you very much, my brother, and thank you for having me always. As you have said, no more, I'm not anymore a guest here. You know, a family. I'm part of the family of LBN right now. And as you know, we are always concerned about our continent. So when the continent calls, when the duty of the continent calls, then we immediately have to answer. So yeah, I'm very glad that you always call on me so that we can come here to deliberate on the issues affecting our continent, and especially at times like these, which are very turbulent on the international, even on the international stage. It's not only in Ethiopia, but even on the international stage, we are having a lot of problems. There's a lot of groups of people who are causing a lot of trouble around the world. So it is just important, very important, that we come from time to time and deliberate on these issues and even inform our people, because it is very important for people to have the right information. You know, when people have the right information, then they have confidence in the leadership.
Thank you very much for being answerable. And let me directly go to our today's discussion. And let me start with this question, Mr. Kwame. The TPLF, which was already labeled terrorist by the Ethiopian parliament, and has for the third time launched an intensified attack on the nation, having trampled the peace option extended to it from the federal government. And how do you see this situation?
This situation is disturbing, to say the least. Looking at how the leadership in Addis Ababa has handled it. It is not only Ethiopians who have been following this situation closely. We as Africans have been following all the way in West Africa, you know, North Africa, South Africa. We are following this situation closely because, as we said in the past, there's sort of a new consciousness among Africans that now, as Africans, we care about the whole continent. You know, we don't only care about one part. So we are in west part of Africa, but we care about what is happening in that part. Now, I can say confidently that this is not a good sign, what the TPLF is doing. But one thing I will say is that I'll continue to have confidence in the abilities of the government in Ethiopia, because the Prime Minister has shown great leadership. He has shown, you know, persistence. He has shown that he's passionate about the country and he would not want the country to break up. And he has shown that it is important to be, you know, to be someone with a softy heart at the same time, to have a strong will. Okay, so he has the will to see that this conflict is solved. But at the same time, he doesn't want to see bloodshed of his own brothers. This situation from a Pan-African spirit can be solved. If you look at how Africans behave, one of the books which was written by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Africa Must Unite, Nkrumah said that Africans, they don't like shedding blood. They are humanistic in their nature. So you can see these characteristics exhibited by you know, the leadership and Prime Minister Abiy, you know, in conducting himself and how he's leading the country, that he has extended the hand. He has extended a hand continuously to TPLF and told them that we need to come and discuss. If it is development issues, you know, in Tigray, let us come and discuss these issues. If you have any other grievance, let us come and discuss. But, you know, pouring bloodshed is not the solution, even though the government in Ethiopia has all the full capacity to go and crush them, to go and crush the TPLF, but he doesn't want to shed blood. And so if the TPLF was looking at this thing, at this situation from a Pan-African or an African perspective, as Africans, like Nkrumah said, Africans don't like shedding blood. They don't like, they are humanistic in their nature. If the TPLF was looking at things from this perspective, I believe this problem could have been solved. They would have cared about this nation, Ethiopia. They would have cared about Africa, okay? As a nation, they would have cared about Africa as our continent, as a people, because we, the people outside, care about this, continent, and we care about every part of this continent. So they have also an obligation to care about this continent. But now, what has happened is that there is external forces influencing them, you see, and these external forces who are influencing them, they don't have any interest, for the people of Ethiopia at heart. They don't have any interest, of the people of Africa at heart. Their work is to, continually plunder, the resources of the continent, plunder the resources of Ethiopia. This is their interest, and to weaken Ethiopia, because Ethiopia for the last for the last period since up to 2020, when we had coronavirus, has been the fastest growing economy on the continent. So there is an interest by these external forces to destabilize the country. So it is only right that Tigray leadership understand this, that if they destroy things, they are destroying for Africa. They are not only destroying for, for Ethiopia. And it is imperative, and myself, I would call on them, the leadership of Tigray, if they are watching, that this is an African issue, and in Africa, how we behave, we sit on the table and we solve these problems. They should abandon, they should put aside and neglect the push, that is the pressure that is being applied on them by these external forces, because these external forces, what they want is destruction, to destroy all the progress that has been made in the country, the spirit of pan-Africanism that has been made, and the conquering or the destruction of Addis Ababa. Anything that to happen to Addis Ababa, anything that may happen to Addis Ababa happens to Africa, because Addis Ababa is the administrative capital of the African continent. Addis Ababa is the aviation capital of the African continent when we are talking about Ethiopian Airlines. So we have to understand this. So I would call on my brothers in the TPLF in Tigray to understand all this, that this is an attack on Africa. So these enemies of Africa who may be working with them and pressuring them and, pumping weapons in them to use the children's soldiers, it is not right that they have themselves to sit down and think about these things critically, because these are enemies of the continent and enemies of Ethiopia and enemies of the African people. So they should be able to understand this and come to the table and sit together with the Prime Minister and what he has said, sit together with their African brethren, the African Union.
This TPLF group is undermining even the African Union and wants an individual figure to lead this negotiation. And this is, I think, they are postponing this negotiation and preparing themselves for war. And how do you see this situation?
Yeah, so since the Prime Minister has tried all means of trying to bring them to the table, and Africans have also tried to bring them on the table, as we know, the African Union appointed, Olusegun Obasanjo, the former president of Nigeria, to try to lead and mediate this situation and bring all the sides to the table. And they have refused to listen to the African Union. That means they have really refused to listen to the whole of Africa. So if the route or the channel of negotiation that has been proposed by the Prime Minister and has been proposed by by Africa, by the whole of Africa, that we should negotiate. Recently, the Prime Minister had communication with the President of Uganda. The President of Uganda said that all sides should negotiate, should sit. This problem will be finished by dialogue. Let us sit down. So if they refuse, that means they have rejected Africa's proposal. And I think in that way, the Prime Minister has the right to take, the aggressive step, because he will be having all the support of the African continent. And they have to know, I think TPLF, as our brothers, have to know that if Africa descends on them, they cannot survive. If Africa, decides that you are a problem, then definitely it's the same problem which will happen. What will happen to them is what happened to Al-Shabaab, that the African Union had to send a military force over there to crush the Al-Shabaab. So it's the same situation that would happen to this, that Ethiopia would send in a force to crush them because they cannot survive. The government has enough infrastructure to be able to put them out of rebellion. And the African continent, the whole African continent, has enough infrastructure to put them out of rebellion. But as Africans, like we have said in the beginning, we do not believe in shedding blood. And that is why we have said we call on them to stop shedding blood of people in Amhara, in our far region. So they should stop these disturbance and let us sit together as brothers. But if they refuse, I think that the Prime Minister and the whole of Africa has the right to use military force to be able to stop them from disturbing, peace and stability, not only in Ethiopia, but in the whole Horn of Africa and the East African region and the whole African continent.
Thank you, Mr. Kwame. And this group pretending as if they are fighting for the freedom of their own people. Recently, they looted 12 tankers of fuel from the World Food Program. And many international organizations are condemning this group, and even those who were their best friends are now condemning the action and situation of this group. And what do you say on this?
Yeah, it is unfortunate that I don't know exactly the mechanism with which the United Nations and the World Food Program is working in Ethiopia. But I believe personally that the World Food Program and the United Nations should work in Ethiopia under the supervision of the government. Okay, so for the United Nations to say that it is working in a region without the supervision of the central government or the federal government, I think it be and the security, it becomes questionable why they are in the country. So we remember that in 2021, last year, in between August and September, the same World Food Program said that it lost trucks when it took aid, 300 trucks, into the Tigray region. And it turned out that these trucks were taken by, by the TPLF. And now some people are even during that period suggested that the UN was delivering weapons for these people to fight. And now when things like this come up, the same World Food Program under the UN has lost fuel to TPLF, then this brings questions to the questions of accountability, to the table in the eyes of Africans, because the UN is not a guest, to destabilizing activities itself on the African continent. We remember in the 1960s, the death of, a prime minister, Patrice Lumumba in the Congo, that the UN was involved in that chaos. And up to now, 60 years on, people have been complaining in the Congo about the UN. Recently, the buildings of the UN were attacked in the Congo. So the UN then comes into accountability that it has to redeem itself, because now as Africans, we have started being suspicious of its activities as a force, not only for imperialism, but a force for destabilization of Africa, the whole of African continent. Because if it is destabilizing, it has failed to stabilize Congo for the last 60 years. And now it has come to Ethiopia to say that it is trying to help. Then this is questionable. It really becomes questionable. And that is where I would suggest that the activities of the UN. So I think that it is time for Africans to take it to the next stage. Now, the next level, it means putting our foot down as Africans, and the UN, its activities have to be limited, either in Addis Ababa, and they should stop going to, those regions. The food and supplies should be handed over to the African Union. The East African community is there. Things should be handed over to the East African community. Things should be handed over to neutral forces who don't have interest in destabilizing or an interest in Afar. We have Russia, we have China, we have all these nations, we have Cuba. These are reputable. Cuba is a reputable, country which has been around, stabilizing and helping different countries when you're talking about medical supplies, So these are all options which we have on the table instead of having the UN to continue to taint its name. If it has still that reputation of being an organization that acts, bilaterally, that is supposed to act on behalf of all humanity and all nations, then the UN has to hold itself accountable, because two things cannot, happen at the same time. That trucks disappeared, 300 trucks, they just disappeared out of nowhere. And then we have 570,000 liters of fuel, disappearing from the UN, from the World Food Program. 570,000, this is a lot of fuel. So this brings, the question of accountability to the UN. And as Africans, we want to say that we are not very happy about the activities of the UN, in the country. Even though the Prime Minister has been very lenient, it is time for us to put our foot down. It is time for the African Union to put the foot down, because, like I said, Addis is the administrative capital of the continent and is the aviation capital of the continent. So any destabilization around this place is not good for the continent, is unacceptable, is not just not good, but is unacceptable even before all the Africans.
What should the Prime Minister do, Mr. Kwame?
Yeah, I think the Prime Minister, like I said, he has to put the foot down. He has to continue. Actually, the Prime Minister has played very, very well his cards. If he's somebody who has been playing with a group of people, I think he's playing chess while other people have been playing checkers. So the Prime Minister, I would say that he has always played. When I heard about these destabilizations, I was discussing these with a friend of mine called Mallet, and we were talking about the next moves. What should the Prime Minister? What do you think? We are as civilians, because we are not in government. We are just civilians, and we were discussing what do you think the Prime Minister should be doing, and this first stage, and she, I was telling her that I think that the Prime Minister, looking at how he has handled this conflict, this rebellion, he needs to continue to engage, because in the first phase, there was victory working together with the African diaspora and the Ethiopian diaspora, to counter the propaganda that was going on, which the Prime Minister spoke about very well at the African Union. And they just ended the 35th ordinary session of the African Union, and he said that there are groups which are against Africa and they are spreading false information. So it's important. He suggests that it's important for us to have a Pan-African media house. You see, so these are solutions which he suggested. So you can see that the Prime Minister has been lenient. He has played his cards very well, and then Ethiopia has been able to win at different stages. If you look at imperialism, the cards which they are playing, the Europeans and the Americans, they are the imperialists I'm talking about. They have been recycling their ways of attacking nations around the world. If you go to Iraq, for example, They claimed that they are going to save children. You know, Saddam is killing children and stuff like that. And they were able to attack and destroy Iraq. It's the same situation when you go to Libya, you go to Syria. They have been using the same playbook. So when we looked at the situation recently about what was happening, and they were spreading false information that the Ethiopian Air Force went to attack Tigray and kill children, we understood very well that they are playing from the same book. And those people who have read about imperialism, European imperialism and American imperialism, very fast understood that these were lies. These people are spreading lies to be able to destabilize the whole African continent. So I think that the Prime Minister has played very well. Even when they have tried, actually they have tried to separate Ethiopia from the region and isolate Ethiopia from Kenya, isolated from Uganda, isolated from the region, from the East African region and the Horn. But the strategy, I'm really very happy. The reason why you see I'm smiling is I'm really very happy about how the Prime Minister has played it very well, because what I'm seeing is that he understands imperialism. He understands it very, very, very well, extremely very well. Because what I suggested to my friend Mallet was that what they are saying that Uganda is training Tigray, I think that is a tactic for destabilization. That is a tactic for division of the East African region. That is what came to my mind immediately, because these tactics have been used in the past, you see. And why would I say that? I would say that it is very important that we are having these conversations. Why would I say that? I would say that because at first you could see that the Prime Minister in around February to March in 2021 was in East Africa region, was in Rwanda, was in Uganda, was in Kenya, and he got all this support when the president Abdul Fattah Sisi of Egypt was in Washington with Trump. The Prime Minister was in the region, putting in order his relations with the people in the region. So Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, and Congo, Democratic Republic of Congo, came out to support Ethiopia in this situation and said it has to be African solutions. Even when Blinken went to Kenya to show that he wants to, impose, American will on the Kenyan government, the Kenyans told him that no, this situation has to be solved by. They stood and told him the situation has to be solved by Ethiopians themselves. So the Prime Minister was able to cultivate relations with the region. Now, in this phase where we are today, they tried to divide the region and isolate Ethiopia and isolate the Prime Minister by spreading propaganda and saying that one of the members in the region is sponsoring the TPLF. And so what I told Mallet was that I think, Mallet, what we should do, we should be careful with the information where it is coming from. And what we should do is that the Prime Minister has to continue to engage. He has to employ the strategy of continuous engagement in the region. He should not isolate himself because they have said that these people are sponsoring. And lo and behold, why I was very happy, I saw him immediately, I saw the ambassador of Ethiopia to Uganda going to the president of Uganda, to meet the president of Uganda, and they had a conversation. And recently, just last week, the son of the president of Uganda was in Ethiopia. So this is what I said, that the Prime Minister has been playing chess while the enemies are playing checkers, because they try to isolate Ethiopia. But he saw what they were doing. He has understood very well what they were trying to do. So, and now when we see him, going, like we learned recently, just yesterday, that he has gone to visit Algeria. So these are the right moves. He has to continue to engage the continent, not only the region of the East African region, but he has to continue to engage the whole, African continent. Even he should go to West Africa, go to South Africa, engage the continent. He could be the Messiah we have been looking for. He could be the new Nkrumah we have been looking for on this continent, because ever since the 60s, we have been looking for another Nkrumah. Where is another Nkrumah? Where is another Kwame Nkrumah? Where is another Haile Selassie? We have been looking for this. So he could be the person to unify the continent. And this could be an opportunity. This destabilization, actually, it could be an opportunity for us to unify the African continent and get a single government, which we have been, wanting to. So I'm really happy about how he has handled the situation and how he has continued, the strategy of continuous engagement, not only with the region, but he has gone ahead now to visit Algeria, where he is, and the whole continent. So he should continue the way he's doing. I think he's doing a very, very good job.
And thank you very much. And let me forward this question again, Mr. Kwame. The WHO director, he has a global responsibility, as you know, this guy, and Dr. Tedros Adhanom utilized the WHO's platform, as a tool of the TPLF, and he presented as if this group, is a victim in connection with this looting fuel. And what do you say on this, and how a person who has a global responsibility just be an activist for one terrorist group?
Yeah, I think that that is a very unfortunate situation, because Dr. Tedros is not only a representative for Tigray, is a representative for the whole African continent. When he was appointed, the whole African continent celebrated. So for him to look at himself as a Tigrayan instead of as an Ethiopian, and more especially as an African, it becomes very unfortunate. It is very unfortunate and a disappointment, not to Ethiopia, not just to Ethiopia, but to the African people themselves, who were very, very proud that an African was appointed to head the World Health Organization. So it becomes a very disappointing situation, and this shows you that either the wrong person was appointed, or the Africans ourselves, we were mistaken to have faith in him, to be happy that an African is at the helm of the World Health Organization, to be able to prove that Africans also, are capable. So if he turns out to be supporting the TPLF instead of supporting the government in Ethiopia, which was elected democratically, then this makes it unfortunate that he's trying to spread, tribalistic, sentiments, to try to express tribalistic sentiments, which tribalistic sentiments in this era where we are in the 21st century do not have a room. Ethiopia is a very big country, 150 million people, many tribes. The whole continent, our African continent, 2,000 tribes. So what will make us stronger as Africans is not concentrating on the tribal issues, even though these tribes which we have are vehicles for the preservation of our culture. But if we want to survive in the 21st century, we have to work together as Africans. And any leadership that does not see the need for Africans to work together, under one government, under one union government, to preserve our cultures, to preserve the good things, to speed up the development, to have things like a Pan-African media house, like what Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed suggested at the African Union. This is the type of leadership that we need. We need this type of leadership like Abiy. But if you have somebody who's talking about tribal issues, sectarian issues, then that means we have the wrong person, in the position of leadership. And it is very, very unfortunate. It shows that that person is not qualified really to be, a leader of a nation, and is not qualified actually to represent the African continent. It is very disappointing to the African continent, the whole African continent. It is a disappointing gesture, is a disappointing thing that he has done to be able not to support a democratic elected government and try to concentrate on tribal issues. Rather, he should concentrate on the whole African continent and representing the whole African continent as it is supposed to, to be.
Is it also fair to use the WHO as a TPLF tool?
It's absolutely, absolutely unfair. And that is why I say that it is very, very disappointing, because this is an organization that is supposed to serve all humanity. And the fact that it is an international organization, it is very unfair for him to use it for his own personal tribal, sectarian sentiments. It is very, very unfair and unfortunate. And like I said, for him as an African who's supposed to represent Africa to the fullest, it is very, very unfortunate that, even the picture that is being painted about Africans out there, because when he's there, he's not being seen as an Ethiopian. He's being seen as a black man, an African. And if they see him, destabilizing the region and using his position and the organization he's leading to represent a tribe in Africa, it becomes very unfortunate. It becomes not only unfortunate, but it is a shame. It is shaming us, the African people. It is a shame on us as African people. We are supposed to be working together. He is supposed to be fighting to represent the whole African continent. So as an organization, WHO as an organization, I think even the leadership themselves, other leaders he's leading with, they should not have allowed this kind of, behavior, to happen, at the helm of Dr. Tedros and whatever, he's doing. They should not have allowed it to happen.
The other point I want to raise is this TPLF group is recruiting children, who are not capable for war to fight against the National Defense Force of Ethiopia, and even using the human wave strategy. What do you say on these? Is it possible using children in this war?
If actually even in just wars which you can say that there are wars for liberation, fighting against colonialism, it is not allowed to recruit children to fight it, to fight wars. And this is just an unjust war that is happening, where this is a rebellion, like we have said. And for them to recruit children, it is very, very unfortunate. And I think that the African Union and African leadership have to take these things seriously, because the United Nations Charter, the United Nations Charter does not allow this. Children have a right to be in school. Children have a right to be under the tutelage of their parents. Children, now are not in school and they are being forced to be slaves, military slaves to these rebels. So it is very unfortunate and unacceptable. It is very unacceptable. International, even on the international stage, in the international norm, like I said, the United Nations Charter does not allow this. The rights of the children should be respected. And these are some of the things which I think that they have to encourage all the people around the country. And we have to support the Prime Minister in his whatever decisive decision that he makes, because it is unacceptable. The children, they are the next generation. So these are the next leaders. So if you send them out there to die, then we don't have the next leaders in the country and in the continent. Where are we going to get the leaders if rebels continue to recruit young children and kill them in war, in senseless wars, whereby they have told them, let us come together and negotiate, and they have refused. So it is unacceptable, and we condemn it. The African Union needs to come out strongly and condemn it, since it is in Addis Ababa, and the whole international community needs to come out and condemn the TPLF for these reckless, these reckless activities and the reckless behavior that it is carrying out.
Thank you. And the other question that I would like to quickly forward is some Western media are still working as a TPLF machine and propagating this TPLF's agenda. And what do you say on this? And if you have comment on some Western...
The Western media, I think that it was defeated in the first phase. In the first phase, I think the Western media was defeated by the organization which the African people did, and which Ethiopians in the diaspora did. They organized themselves. The government in Addis Ababa employed its resources, very well. I think the Western media was defeated in the first round. That was the first group of agitators who were defeated. It was the Western media. Even Trump himself, the former President Trump has come out to say that it is fake news. The mainstream media, Western media, and what they are broadcasting is fake news. So this is a former president of the United States has said that they are, putting out fake news. So it is very easy for us to understand now, since a whole president came out to say that they are pushing out fake news. So it is not, it is not news to us now anymore. It is not new.
Mr.
What they're putting out.
Rwanda's President Paul Kagame even blaming this Western media recently. And if you can add also, yeah.
Yes, he criticized, definitely. He criticized the BBC especially. They are always talking about human rights, but it is not Africans who are violating human rights around the world. They are always putting us in a position of defense. We should defend ourselves for violating human rights. But it is not Africans who are violating human rights around the world. It's not Africans who did slavery and killed millions. It's not Africans who colonized the people around the world and killed millions. It's not Africans who are fighting and attacking Iraq, Syria, Iran, Vietnam, powering weapons in Ukraine. So it's not Africans who are violating human rights. So the Western media, I think they have their priorities wrong. And just like I said, the president, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, said that they are putting out fake news. So their work is to put out fake news. So it is not new to us. But the good thing for us is that we have been able to study them. We have been able to understand them. Even before Donald Trump said, we already knew that they are putting out fake news. And we were able to organize ourselves and defeat them. That is why they were defeated, because they are not fighting for any just cause, but they are rather fighting to spread false information, like what we have seen. We spoke about babies. Babies are being killed in Tigray. It's the same script which they used in Iraq. Babies were being killed in Iraq, and then they attacked, Iraq, and destroyed the country. 1 million people died in Iraq. So we have understood, these are lessons we have learned from as Africans, and I think as Ethiopian people, they are also learned from these lessons. And that is why it's very, very important to stand behind your government, especially if it is democratically elected government, like the government of Prime Minister Abiy. It's very important for all the country to stand together, to try and stand together as much as possible. We have to stand together as Africans. We have to stand together because now we know the enemy. The enemy is out there spreading false news, false information about us. So we have to understand. So whenever information comes in, we have to take our time to understand. We have to wait for the government to make the final, analysis and give us the right information instead of these foreigners who don't have any interest in peace and stability in the region. So it's very, very good. It's very nice that we were able to defeat them. And I think that we will continue to defeat them because they are just recycling the methods. And we are already aware now. We already know the methods which they have been using. So it's very, very good that we have been able to, to defeat them. And we will continue to defeat them, I think. They will continue to lose.
And finally, if you have any message to Ethiopian people and all African brothers and sisters in general.
Okay, thank you very much, my brother, for having me. As always, I said now I'm no more a guest around here on the OBN. I'm part of OBN. I'm part of the family of OBN. We are part of Ethiopia. We are African family now. So the only thing which I would like to add to the Ethiopian people is that they have to stand behind, all Ethiopia has to stand behind the Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed, and his government, and trust the moves he's making. He's making some of the wisest moves around the, the African continent. Like I said, I was very, very happy, and I'm still very happy about how he's handling the situation. But when he's pushed it too far, he needs to put his foot down and defend the country, so that he can, the killing can stop, the recruiting of our children can stop into, destruction. And the African continent has to come and support, because this attack is not an Ethiopian attack, is not an attack on Ethiopia, but these external forces. This is an absolute attack on Africa, is an absolute attack on the African continent. Addis Ababa is the administrative capital of the continent, is the aviation capital of the continent. So as Africans, we have very much, we have a lot of interest in this situation and what is happening in Ethiopia. So the African people have to pay close attention, and then they have to continue to support the government in Ethiopia. The African Union has to get its act together, because we need a union government on this African continent, and it needs to put its foot down and repel and resist any pressures, any imperialistic pressures which are coming in and stopping the government in Ethiopia, from acting, and itself as the African Union from acting on behalf of the African people. So the leadership have to put their foot down. They have to be resolute. They have to be strong and defend the African people. But the African people themselves will continue to stand behind resolute leadership, like the leadership of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. Thank you very much.
Mr. Kwame Gonza from Ghana, thank you very much for your analysis and for your time. And you are our usual partner, as you have said. We appreciate for that all. Thank you very much.